The Giants take on the football team, 8:20 p.m. Eastern kickoff this Thursday. The Washington football team is minus 3.5 with the total at 40 and a hook. And if you like the New York football Giants in an upset on the road here, they're plus $1.45 for some money line cash. And if you want to see which one of these free YouTube picks that I'm actually betting on personally, there's only one way to do that, and that's to sign up for a membership on my website. And once again, that's brockpage.com. And despite some offensive struggles in week one for the G-Men, quarterback Daniel Jones still threw for 267 yards and a touchdown. Now his favorite target was Sterling Shepard, who had 9 grabs for $113 and a score. Now Saquon Barkley's been upgraded to probable for Thursday night's contest. I'd like to see maybe a few more touches going to him. Now, New York's taking on a Washington football team who threw for a piddly 133 yards in week one, and that was actually a league low, even lower than the Packers. Now, the football team was also second to last in the NFL in offensive time of possession. Meanwhile, defensively, Washington got absolutely torched in the secondary by the Chargers. 334 total yards passing they gave up in that loss. Now the backup, Fitzpatrick, he's out. Gibson is questionable. And when it comes to the total on this one, both teams saw their openers fall under the number. They also saw 7 out of their last 10 head-to-head meetings fall under the number as well. If you're into historical trends, I'm going to lean toward the underdog New York Giants plus 3.5 and the under 40.5 points. Next ball game, Saints, Panthers, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern kickoff this Sunday. The New Orleans Saints are minus 3 with the total at 44 points. And I think it's pretty safe to say the Saints shocked a lot of people with their dismantling of Green Bay. Jameis Winston completed 70% of his passes and threw for 5 touchdowns. The Saints also rushed for over 170 yards in that victory. Now the Saints defense on the other side of the ball, they held the pack to just 3 points and 43 yards rushing on the ground. The secondary also had a pair of interceptions, and the D-line had a couple of sacks. Now, Lattimore and Davenport, they're both out. Roby is questionable, so keep an eye on Roby with regard to the injury report. Now, New Orleans is taking on a Panther squad who put up just 19 points in week one against the Jets. And I get it, they won the game, but not an offensive track meet there. And of course, if you're into historical trends, once again, the Panthers have lost 8 out of their last 10 against New Orleans. Now, total-wise, 2 pretty good defenses are going at it in this one. Both of these teams also saw their week one contests fall under the total. I'm going to lean toward the New Orleans Saints minus 3 and the under 44. Next matchup, Niners versus the Eagles, 1 p.m. East. The San Francisco 49ers are minus 3.5, totals 50. Now the Niners failed to cover against the Detroit Lions in week one. A lot of folks saying the Lions are the worst team in the league right now. The number closed at 9.5, and they beat them by just 8. Defensive collapse late in that game as well. And like I said, the Niners, they've had significant problems on defense in that game. They gave up 314 passing yards to the likes of Jared Goff and company. Now Armstead, Mosley, Greenlaw, and Kinlaw they're all questionable for this Sunday's action. And speaking of action, they're taking on a Philadelphia squad who held Atlanta to just 6 total points in week one. Javon Hargrave had a pair of sacks from the defensive line, along with 6 tackles. Avonte Maddox also led the club with 9 tackles himself. And of course, this Eagles offense rushed for over $170 this past Sunday in Atlanta. Miles Sanders, and Kenneth Gainwell, they both averaged over 4 yards a carry apiece. And of course, quarterback Jalen Hurts, he completed over 77% of his passes for 264 and 3 touchdowns. Now keep an eye on the Eagles safeties. McLeod and Epps, they're both questionable for Sunday's action. Keep an eye on that injury report. When it comes to the total in this one, 6 out of these teams' last 10 meetings did get over the total. The Niners also saw their week one matchup with Detroit get over the line as well. I'm going to lean toward the Philadelphia Eagles plus 3.5 and the over 50. Next matchup, Raiders, Steelers, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The Pittsburgh Steelers are minus 5.5, totals 47. And I'll tell you what, the Steelers looked pretty flat for the first 30 minutes of their Week 1 contest with Buffalo. I know they got the win, but you may not want to start slow against Las Vegas. And despite that win, Pittsburgh rushed for just 75 yards on the ground. Ben Roethlisberger, he's looking like Slothless Burger. He's slow back there. He completed just 56% of his passes for a $188 and just one score. Meanwhile, defensively, the Steelers finished in the bottom 3 in number of plays on the field. Now they're taking on a Raider club who got plenty of offense. Derek Carr threw for 435 in the opener, a pair of scores. His favorite target was tight end Darren Waller, who had 10 grabs for 105 and a touchdown. Meanwhile, defensively, the Raiders finished in the top 10 in fewest pass yards allowed. Now keep an eye on Mariota, Ngakoue, Incognito, and Teamer. They're all listed as questionable. And when it comes to the number in this one, Vegas' season opener went 10 points above the posted number. I like the Las Vegas Raiders plus 5.5 and the over 47. Next ball game, Bills, Dolphins, 1 p.m. East. Buffalo's minus 3.5, totals 47 and a hook. Now, Miami's a really tough place to play, and certainly tough after a big, blowing a big second half lead like the Bills did this past Sunday. Buffalo finished with just 16 total points on the day, and they found themselves in the bottom 10 in the league in yards per play. Now they're taking on a Miami club who held New England to just 16 total points, and they were led by Jerome Baker, who had a dozen tackles in the game. When it comes to the total in this one, two pretty good defenses going at it here in this one. Both teams also saw their Week 1 contest fall under the total. I'm going to lean toward the Miami Dolphins plus 3.5 and the under 47 and a hook. Next matchup, it is going to be Patriots versus the Jets, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The New England Patriots are minus 6, totals 42. I think the Pats should be competitive in this one because of their defense. They led the NFL in defensive time of possession last weekend. They also held the Dolphins to just 74 yards on the ground. Kyle Duggar and Devin McCourty, they led the defense with 7 tackles apiece. Meanwhile, offensively, Mac Jones was able to complete over 74% of his passes for 281 yards and a touchdown. Now they're taking on a Jets team who rushed for just 45 yards against Carolina. New York also finished in the bottom 3 last weekend in yards per play. I think this Patriots defense is going to force Zach Wilson to make bad decisions. He completed only 54% of his passes last week. He threw a pick, and he was also sacked 6 times. Now, total-wise, both teams saw their Week 1 contest stay under the line. I like the New England Patriots minus 6 and the under 42. Now, it looks like we skipped the Rams versus the Colts. I'll include a free pick on that in the comment section below. Sorry about that, guys. Next matchup, Broncos, Jaguars, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Denver's minus 6, totals 45.5. Denver's defense finished in the top 5 in fewest rush yards allowed last week. They held the Giants to just 60 yards on the ground. That's a Saquon Barkley-led Giants team. Now, Von Miller had a pair of sacks and 3 TFLs. Keep an eye on Fuller, Simmons, and Darby. They each had 6 tackles apiece out of the secondary as well. Meanwhile, offensively, the Broncos finished in the top 10 last weekend in yards per play. Melvin Gordon had 11 touches for 101 and a score. Meanwhile, Teddy Bridgewater completed 78% of his passes, along with a couple touchdowns as well. Now, Glasgow and Chubb, they're both questionable, so keep an eye on those guys. But regardless, they're taking on a Jacksonville squad who allowed 160 yards on the ground in their opener, as well as 37 total points. Meanwhile, offensively, Trevor Lawrence completed just 54% of his passes, and he also threw 3 interceptions. Herndon and Smith, they're both banged up on this Jaguar defense. Keep an eye on them. When it comes to the total in this one, Jacksonville saw their opener get 13 points above the posted total for that contest. I'm going to lean toward the Denver Broncos minus 6 in the over 45.5. Next matchup, Texans versus the Browns, 1 o'clock East. Cleveland's minus 12.5, totals 48. Now, the Browns actually struggled a lot defensively in their opener. They gave up 33 points to Mahomes and the boys, along with 324 yards in the air. They finished last week in the bottom 10 in the NFL in yards given up per play. Odell's still out. Treader, Conklin, Hubbard, Dunn, Davis, Wills, Delpit, and Fields, they're all questionable for the Browns. They're taking on a Houston club who did manage to, they did beat up on a fairly bad Jaguars team, but they were impressive doing it. Tyrod Taylor, he threw for 291 and a couple of scores. Meanwhile, Brandon Cooks had 5 grabs for $132. Meanwhile, defensively, this Texans defense finished in the top 10 in defensive time of possession, despite a handful of troublesome series. I'll certainly not spare them that. But anyway, total-wise, both teams saw their Week 1 openers get over the posted number. I think Houston can keep it close. Give me the Texans plus 12.5 in the over 48. Next ball game, Bengals, Bears, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Chicago's -2, totals 45. The Bears threw for just $188 in their 20-point loss last week to the Rams. Chicago also finished in the bottom 10 in yards per play. Now, big offensive tackle Jason Peters, he's questionable with a quad. Meanwhile, Goldman, Ayingbukwe, and Borum, they're all questionable as well. This Bears defense also allowed over 310 yards passing in Week 1. They're taking on a Bengals squad who certainly can sling it. And, of course, Joe Burrow, he completed over 74% of his passes, along with 2 scores. Now, his favorite target was Jamar Chase, who caught 5 balls for 101 and a score. Meanwhile, rushing-wise, Joe Mixon, he ran for $127 and a touchdown himself. This Bengals offense also finished in the top 10 in offensive time of possession. Now, when it comes to the number in this one, both teams saw their Week 1 matchups get over the posted number. I'm going to lean toward the Cincinnati Bengals +2 in the over 45. Next game, Vikings, Cardinals, 4:05 Eastern start time. Arizona's -4, totals 51. The Cardinals scored 38 in the opener and rushed for $136. Kyler Murray also threw for 289 along with 4 touchdown passes. Meanwhile, defensively, Arizona held the Tennessee Titans to just 86 yards on the ground. Chandler Jones had a ridiculous 5 sacks on the day, along with 4 tackles for loss. Now they're taking on a Vikings team who allowed 3 sacks on Sunday and finished in the bottom 10 in rushing. Meanwhile, defensively, the Vikings gave up nearly $150 on the ground. Barr and Darisaw, they're both banged up for Minnesota. When it comes to the scoring in this one, the Vikings saw their opener with Cincinnati get over the posted number. I like the Arizona Cardinals -4 in the over 51. Next contest, Falcons, Bucks, 4:05 East. Tampa Bay's -12.5, totals 52. The Bucks finished Week 1 in the top 3 in the league in passing. Tom Brady completed 64% of his passes for 379 and 4 scores. Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin, they both had over 100 yards each receiving and a touchdown apiece as well. The Buccaneers topped off Week 1 in the top 5 in yards per play. Now they're taking on an Atlanta club who's really looking like they're having some problems down there. They threw for under 140 yards against a rebuilding Eagles team last week, and defensively, they looked equally as bad. The Falcons finished in the bottom 3 in rush yards allowed. When it comes to the total in this one, 9 out of these teams' last 10 meetings did manage to get over the number. Meanwhile, the Bucs saw their opener with Tampa Bay get 8 points above the posted total for that game as well. I'm going to lean toward the Tampa Bay Bucs -12.5 and the over 52. Next ball game, Titans, Seahawks, 4:25 Eastern start time. Seattle's -5.5, totals 54. Russell Wilson completed over 78% of his passes for 254 and 4 scores. Tyler Lockett had 100 yards receiving on the day, along with 2 touchdowns. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side of the ball, Bobby Wagner led the charge with 13 tackles, as the Hawks ranked in the top 10 in the NFL in fewest yards allowed per play. Now they're taking on a Tennessee squad who allowed 38 points in Week 1. and they also ranked in the bottom 10 in rush yards allowed. And meanwhile, offensively, the big bad Tennessee rushing attack, well, they were held to a measly 86 yards on the ground. Now, Reynolds and Jackson, they're both questionable for the Titans. When it comes to the scoring in this one, both teams saw their openers fall under the number. I'm going to lean toward the Seattle Seahawks -5.5 and the under 54. Next ball game, it is going to be Cowboys versus the Chargers, 4:25 Eastern kickoff. The LA Chargers are -3, totals 55. And although the Chargers looked great passing the football last week, they were held to just 90 yards on the ground. Now, keep an eye on Balaga, Marshall, and Adderley. They're all listed on the injury report for Los Angeles. Now, the Chargers are taking on a Dallas team who nearly upset the world champions on Thursday Night Football. Dak was awesome. He completed over 72% of his passes for 403 yards and 3 touchdowns. Mari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, they each had over 100 yards receiving apiece, and they both combined for 3 total scores. Now, offensive guard Zach Martin, he should be ready to go here Sunday after he's been in quarantine. Oh, man, got the shot and still ended up getting the COVID. That's crazy. That shouldn't happen. Gregory, Wilson, and Wright, they're all questionable for Sunday's action. So keep an eye on those guys. And when it comes to the total in this one, LA saw their season opener with Washington stay under the total by nearly double digits. I'm going to lean toward the Cowboys +3 and the under 55. Next matchup, Sunday Night Football, Chiefs versus the Ravens, 8:20 Eastern start time. Kansas City's -3, totals 55. The Chiefs finished week 1 in the top 10 in yards per play. Patrick Mahomes completed 75% of his passes for 337 and 3 scores. And wide receiver Tyreek Hill had an absurd 197 yards receiving, along with a touchdown. Now keep an eye on Matthew, Hitchens, Clark, and Blythe. They're all listed as questionable. The Chiefs are taking on a depleted Baltimore roster who gave up 33 to Vegas this past Monday in an overtime game. The Ravens allowed over 400 yards passing, and that's certainly a recipe for disaster going against Patty Mahomes. And as a matter of fact, the Ravens were dead last in the NFL last week in pass yards allowed. And when it comes to the scoring in this one, both teams saw their week 1 contests get over the number. I'm going to lean toward the Kansas City Chiefs -3 and the over 55. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup. Monday Night Football, it is going to be Lions versus the Packers, 8:15 p.m. Eastern start time Monday night. The Green Bay Packers are -11, totals 48. Green Bay scored a league low 3 points this past weekend. They were also dead last in the NFL in rushing. A.J. Dillon was the Pack's leading rusher with 19 yards on the ground. That's terrible. Meanwhile, Aaron Rodgers, he completed just 53% of his passes for $133 and a pair of interceptions. That's pretty bad as well. Savage, DeGara, and Scott, they're all listed as questionable for the game. They're taking on a Lions team who had a real nice cover against San Francisco in the opener. This Lions offense exploded for 33 total points. Quarterback Jared Goff, he completed 67% of his passes for 338 and 3 touchdowns. I like the Detroit Lions +11 and the over 48. With that, guys, now it's time for our quick pick recap. Powered to you by my website at brockpage.com. I like the Giants +3.5, under 40 and a hook. New Orleans -3, under 44. Philadelphia +3.5, over 50. Las Vegas +5.5, over 47. Miami +3.5, under 47 and a hook. New England -6, under 42. Denver -6, over 45.5. Houston +12.5, over 48. Cincinnati +2, over 45. Arizona -4, over 51. Tampa Bay -12.5, over 52. Seattle -5.5, under 54. Dallas +3, under 55 points. Kansas City -3, over 55. Before I make my next and final free pick for the video, one final reminder that if you want to see which one of these free YouTube picks that I'm actually betting on personally, There's only one way to do that, and that's to sign up for a membership on my website. And once again, that's brockpage.com. I'm going to lean toward the Detroit Lions plus 11 and the over 48. With that, guys, now it's time for our shout out of the day. And that's going to come from our YouTube platform. And of course, today's shout out of the day, that's going to go to Carolina Tar Heel, who actually asked the other day, pretty good question here. They said, hey, Brock, can you tell me what the hook means? The hook is the half a point. So if I say 55.5, the half, that's the hook. Anyway, great comment by Carolina Tar Heel. Great to see you in the comment section below. And with that, guys, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out on brockpage.com. If you guys end up getting a membership here today, just keep in mind, we're going to bill you the day you sign up and then the first of every month following that. So if you do end up getting a membership here today, you're going to get access to that content all the way through the end of September. I always tell folks the earlier in the month you sign up, the better. But most importantly, guys, gotta thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. I really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. And with that said, guys, happy Wednesday to you. Happy hump day to you. And I look forward to seeing you later on today on my website at brockpage.com.